40 years ago, a group of conservative activists gathered at a hotel in Birmingham. They had come to hear a speech by the radical Tory politician, Enoch Powell.
We were the only camera team there. BBC were there with the radio, and I think there must have been a couple of local newspaper people. Not that many, actually. It was a Saturday. It was a normal Saturday in April.
Powell had kept the content of his address a closely guarded secret. No one knew they were about to hear the most controversial speech in modern British history. It would be called Rivers of Blood.
In this country, in 15 or 20 years' time, the black man will have the whip hand over the white man.
That speech triggered an explosion of bigotry and prejudice and alarm and fear and tension. It was right across British society. He had put a match to a tinderbox.
He's notorious.
Powell claimed mass migration would bring division and violence. Many dismissed him as a racist scaremonger.
Powell's big mistake was precisely to talk openly about things that the political elite had decided could not be talked about openly, which is why he was drummed out of political life in Britain.
Instead, the liberal establishment embraced a radically different vision for the country from that of Powell. Multiculturalism. But 40 years on, and in the wake of riots and terror attacks, many are now asking, was Enoch Powell right to predict disaster in his Rivers of Blood speech?
It is like watching a nation busily engaged in heaping up its own funeral pile.
Only months before Powell's Rivers of Blood speech, the Beatles broadcast live to a global audience of 400 million people. This was a radical new image of 60s Britain as a more liberal, diverse and tolerant society. While many celebrated this vision, others were disturbed by the prospect of profound change. Above all, they feared the revolution that was most transforming the country.
Today, there are over 1 million coloured people in Britain. Why have they come in such numbers during the past 20 years? What impact have we had on them? And what effect has their coming had on the rest of us?
Race and immigration were explosive issues. Enoch Powell deliberately lit the fuse. Rivers of Blood remains one of the best known, but least understood speeches of modern times. For the first time on television, we've assembled the recorded fragments of speech to better understand Powell's argument.
In this country, in 15 or 20 years' time, the black man will have the whip hand over the white man.
Powell claimed the most incendiary remarks were quotations from concerned constituents. But he knew how controversial the speech was going to be.
Well, I can already hear the chorus of execration. How dare I say such a horrible thing? How dare I stir up trouble and inflame feelings by repeating such a conversation? My answer is that I do not have the right not to do so.
It was a speech dealing with a highly controversial and sensitive issue, and the speech was being made by a very intelligent, very intellectual and very experienced senior politician within the Conservative Party.
At the age of 56, Powell, a prominent right-winger, was taking the greatest risk of his career with an attack on immigration. Few frontline politicians had dared speak out against it until now. Powell saw himself as a radical visionary, more in tune with the feelings of the masses than with his colleagues.
Enoch Powell had the gift of prophetic utterance. He had the gift of language and of mind to make prophetic statements from the mountain, which people listened to.
Those whom the gods wish to destroy, they first make mad.
He was a curiously intense man. Certainly a loner, certainly highly intelligent, certainly very confident of his own views and with deeply held views, and very determined that they should be heard. There was, in that sense, something of a missionary about him.
Powell was a conviction politician. He'd already resigned from a previous Conservative government over economic policy.
He was somebody who took a point, elaborated it, and was led by it to its own implied conclusion. And as a philosopher, I admired that. That's the way one should think if one's interested in truth. But if one's interested in persuading people, then of course that might be a mistake. People are often frightened by logic. They're frightened by the truth also.
Excuse me, Mr. Powell, will you be letting your name go forward as a candidate?
I'm saying nothing at all, so don't waste your time.
Do you think your party's chances will be enhanced by a new leader?
Enoch Powell was ambitious, but his career hadn't prospered as he believed it should have. In 1965, he had lost out in the race to become Conservative Party leader to his great rival, Edward Heath.
I would like to express my gratitude to Enoch Powell. And I am, of course, delighted that we shall serve together in the shadow cabinet.
What Enoch felt so strongly about Heath was that Enoch, had come to his view of life on his own. Heath had, if you like, tailored his view to what his smart friends in the Tory party wanted. And I think there was always an underlying contempt for Heath for that reason.
Powell believed that a hard-hitting speech might shock Heath into taking tough action on immigration. It would also raise his own profile. Conviction and political ambition met in a potent brew.
Enoch Powell was a very bad colleague, and that's not the highest political gift, but it means you're not really going to get all that far if you can't actually work with other people. And he had something in him, something lonely in him, something theatrical in him. He had to be something special.
Part of what was special about Enoch was that he was difficult, and you don't make oysters without some sand to begin with. And I think the Tory party, and particularly the Tory leader at the time, found him difficult. He was a bigger figure, really, than the leader, and that usually leads to a confrontation which results in one of them being destroyed.
Powell's speech had been meticulously planned. A few days before, he had confided in an old family friend, Clem Jones, who was the editor of Powell's local paper, the Wolverhampton Express and Star. Jones had been advising Powell for some time on how to manage the media.
Enoch said, I'm making a big speech on Saturday. And my father said, well, what's it all about? Enoch wouldn't tell him what it was about, but he said, listen, Clem, what's going to happen is, he said, when a rocket goes up in the sky and the stars break away, he said, well, this time, when the rocket goes up in the sky, the stars are going to stay up in the firmament.
We must be mad. Literally mad as a nation to be permitting the annual inflow of some 50,000